Thank you very much, everyone, for coming through. So today I'm going to be running through my presentation, turning to the dark side. So basically utilizing offensive techniques in incident response. So let's start off with a scenario. You're faced with a ransomware attack. The device is fully encrypted, leading to hardware failure and complete loss of data. No network login due to the limited device storage, and no remote login or alerting on the system. How would you deal with this scenario? And that's what we're here to talk about. So first of all, my name is Archie Essien. I work for Solid Security over in London. Been there for about 3 years. I studied computer networking and I got into cybersecurity just due to the fact is every day is interesting. There's always a new kind of cat and mouse game. So that's just my interest, and I've been happy and hopefully spend my lifetime in it. So today's agenda and what we're going to be talking about. So some context in regards to incident response, red team and blue team. So cybersecurity 101. Go through some techniques we make use of in incident response, external scanning, and a few other techniques or other scenarios we've been faced with. And we'll have time for questions at the end. Perfect. So time for a bit of context. Digital forensics versus incident response, just because people often confuse the two. So in terms of digital forensics, you're usually leaning towards an over collection of data, whereas in incident response, kind of the collection of data is based on kind of evidence-based reasoning. So we wouldn't just collect data for the sake of collecting it. In forensics, digital forensics as well, we've got longer time constraints to provide answers, where in incident response, I hope many people here have experienced, as soon as you get the data, they're kind of expecting answers as soon as possible. So you're kind of having to feed them answers with the little time that you do have. In digital response as well, investigations are expected to turn over every stone, whereas in incident response, you kind of have the opportunity to kind of freestyle and kind of make it unique because you're just trying to get answers as soon as possible. And lastly, in regards to digital response, the reporting is very much based for litigation purposes. So you're going to go to court. It needs to be evidence, proof, and foolproof. So you don't have the opportunity to kind of make a mistake at all. The main thing is with incident response, you're able to focus on the most likely scenario rather than kind of 100% foolproof evidence-based judgment. In terms of blue team versus red team, again, people kind of make it seem like it's two different sides, but I see it as two sides of the same coin, or two sides of a coin, I would say. Kind of, they make it seem like they're both usually opposing each other. So in the red team side, they're usually kind of using the techniques and trying to see how to get into systems, kind of the ethical hackers, we'll say. Whereas in blue team, we're usually kind of on a defense approach. So we would obviously want to make kind of things more secure for the environment. But at the end of the day, both of us are kind of working to ensure that the organization security is improved and is much better for the future. I just want to run through a quick theory. Is Occam's theory here. It kind of would help kind of in understanding this whole scenario. So the theory is, if you have two compelling ideas explaining the same phenomenon, you should prefer the simpler one. So taking that into two different contexts, the general context would be, if you see a tree knocked down, you can say maybe a meteorite has knocked it down, and that's the reason why the tree's down. The other scenario is most likely that the wind just blew it, and that's why the tree got knocked down. In incident response, another example of this could be you're faced with an incident where a device is compromised, and then the 3 points would be the RDP port is exposed. The threat actor's MO is usually to target RDP's devices that are exposed to the internet. And the last one would be the RDP had been exposed to the internet at the time. So it's most likely the threat actor that's known for the MO of targeting a device with the RDP being connected to gain access to that device through the exposed RDP. So I'm going to run through some scenarios here. So, sorry, let me get water. So the scenario is we're faced with an incident where there's reconnaissance and scanning. So this is going to be the context, and I'll give you an example where we're actually using techniques in a lifetime scenario. So gathering a list of external IP addresses on the network, utilizing open source threat intelligence to paint a picture of open ports and network services, and review the available data with any glaring openings in RDP port potentially. So in the actual example I've been faced with in the workplace, wow, color is not great there. The example faced of this was we've had a web server that was compromised, which was running a MongoDB server service within it. All the data had been wiped out. The server been configured with minimal logging, and utilizing Showdown in this instance, we're able to identify that the web server had been exposed to the internet during the time. The reason for that was the IT guy had wanted to gain access to it remotely from home. And the service made use of the default username and password. So despite the lack of evidence that we had with the minimal logging, we were able to kind of get confirmation or point to the most likelihood of that scenario being the fact that the RDP, that the device was connected to the internet and the threat actor was able to bypass or gain access to the device due to that weak password and username and password at the time. Another scenario I could run through quickly is the password domain of the account had been leaked on the website. We done a full scan and pulled the emails and passwords of the AD at the time and enriched that root cause through techniques using the leaked data. So the scenario what was faced with this here was an M365 account which had MFA had been compromised. The log data confirmed successful IMAP logging. No evidence of the phishing email or credential harvesting had been found within the device. And the leaked data research identified the compromised user's password and email on the dark web. So in that instance, we spoke to the user and found out that the user is still using that password for that device or for that username. And it's most likely that the threat actor had made use of that leaked password, which is provided on the dark web. Especially with IMAPing as well, unfortunately, it doesn't kind of provide additional security. Even though you have MFA configured, you're able to bypass that just due to it being a legacy protocol, if you don't know. The final example as well that I'm going to run through is the context of it is dumped hash passwords on the nts.dit file from the domain controllers and performed Active Directory mapping with security tooling such as AD Recon and Bloodhound. Identify the weak accounts within there, and that could allow it to be easily compromised with the fact that the threat actor was able to map out the network and gain an idea of where to get to. So most likely the DC that we're targeting in that instance. So an example of this we had was the RDS server had compromised due to the printer service being down or being exposed to the internet. There's no clear link to that RDS server, and the printer, due to the virtual machine encryption, created a custom password list using the leaked data and keywords, and then cracked that password for the printer account, which had used the company's name and which had been reused in higher accounts previously, further to that. The AD mapping showed that the printer account had RDP access, and from there we're able to see that the threat actor could easily map out the network and gain access to the domain controller from the printer server that's been exposed to the internet. So again, in this instance, minimal data logging, and from there we had to make use of offensive techniques to kind of make sense of how the threat actor could have got access into those further devices within the account. So again, with all of those points, I hope you can kind of see where Occam's razor links in terms of we have minimal login, we have to use the red teaming skills to gain an idea of how it's possible that those accounts was compromised and the threat actor would get into the main areas. So again, I posed this question to you at the start of this talk. You're faced with a ransomware attack. It's full device encryption leading to hardware failure and complete data loss. Network login is limited due to the device storage, and no remote login or alert systems are available. Hopefully, if you have more ideas on how you could deal with this from you did at the start of the presentation, then hopefully this presentation has been useful to all of you. Again, does anyone have any questions on that? Wow.
Thanks, Archie, for a great talk. Yeah, any questions?
Great.
And a round of applause, thank you.
Oh, hello. Oh, wait, sorry. There's a question there.
We'll do applause after.
Did you ever find out how the leaked credentials, and I think like the second one, was actually ended up on wherever it was you found it, or was that completely out of the scope of what you had to do for the job?
So with ourselves, we can see where it has been uploaded. So again, sometimes you see on Telegram chats, sometimes you see on specific dark webs that associates with a threat actor. In this case, we don't really look into how that had happened. Again, it could be someone entering their work email and password, shopping on LinkedIn or using it for LinkedIn or using it for shopping, and it could have been compromised in that sense. So we don't really go too deep into that. It's there, and take it as that.
Thank you very much for the presentation. So you use several scenarios here. One is from the server side, then the email, then the last one, which is the Active Directory.
Yeah.
As a starter, right, what would be your advisory when it comes to the blue side of things, which is the defensive side? What would be your advice? Because you've mentioned RODP. So apart from RODP, what other mitigation do you think that needs to be in place when it comes to a web server, considering that that web server needs to be public facing, right?
Yeah.
But there needs to be a control in place.
Exactly.
So what would be your advice when it comes to that server side of things?
Exactly.
Then when it comes to Active Directory, yes, spot on.
Yeah.
But what are the controls, let's say for a starter, they need to have in place, considering that they don't know what they need to do, And you also talked about the red teamer. If someone as a red teamer needs to what are the things they need to consider when it comes to breaking that kill chain?
No, perfect. That's a very good question. So with that, again, there's many different kind of mitigation techniques or different mitigation things that they could do to kind of harden the security on those devices. Again, the first thing and foremost is make sure you're up to date with security patching. Often at the time, people kind of leave that out and the device becomes vulnerable and it's easy for a threat actor to kind of compromise that device at the time. Another area is kind of, rather than using RDP, maybe making use of a VPN service or something of that nature with MFA in place to prevent it just being kind of easily connected to and whilst it's web facing. Another kind of mitigation technique could be ensuring that it's locked down and kind of segregated from the network a bit better. So there's a few techniques there. It's just, again, dependent on the scenario. And again, a lot of businesses will find a reason for why they're exposing it. So you always need to kind of make sure that if you're doing something, you're justifying it properly with an organization, not just doing it for the sake of it's easier. Well, great question.
Great. Thanks again, Archie.
Perfect.
I think that's all the questions we've got time for. So a big round of applause, please.
I was going to say as well, again, I know it's very daunting to probably ask questions here, but if you do have any questions later on in future, please feel free to get contact with me on LinkedIn and I'll always be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.